The sun was heavy that day. It didn't shine kindly. It burned like fire from the sky. The wind didn't blow. The ground was dry and cracked like old leather. Dust flew with every step. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. It was the kind of heat that made the world feel empty. But two kids were running. They didn't run for fun. They didn't laugh or shout. They just ran. The older boy looked about 13. His name was Thomas. His face was thin, his lips dry, and his boots didn't match. One was leather, broken and torn. The other was tied with rope and canvas. His pants were too short, his shirt too big, and his vest was falling apart. But he kept going. In one hand, he carried a small brown suitcase. It dragged in the dirt behind him, bouncing every few steps. In his other hand, he held tight to a little girl's fingers. She was no older than 4. Her name was Callie. Her blonde hair was in 2 messy braids, and she wore a pink dress with a ripped hem. Her cheeks were red from heat. She didn't cry. She just stared ahead with wide, tired eyes. She held a stuffed chicken under her arm. It was missing one eye. The head tilted to the side like it was tired too. Thomas didn't look back. Not once. He couldn't. He knew what was behind them. They had been running for 2 days. Running from the man with the long coat, sharp eyes, and cold hands. His name was Clay Maddox. He said he would feed them. He said he would help. But he lied. Thomas had made a mistake. He trusted him. They had been hiding in a barn near Pike Hollow. After their mother died, they had nowhere to go. Maddox found them and gave them a bed, gave them food. Then one night, he tried to sell Callie. Thomas had seen it happen. He didn't wait. He grabbed a piece of wood, hit Maddox in the head, and took Callie. They ran into the dark, past the trees, through the dust, and toward the unknown. Now, as they reached the edge of a small town, Thomas stopped for a moment. His chest rose and fell fast. His legs shook. Callie leaned against his side, her chicken held tight. The town looked silent. Old wood buildings stood along the road. A saloon with swinging doors. A dusty feed store. A sheriff's office with a cracked window. A chapel at the far end with a broken roof. No people outside, no horses, just stillness. Thomas walked slowly now, still holding Callie's hand. No one welcomed them. No one smiled. One old man sat in a rocking chair and spat into the dust. But he didn't speak. They reached the dry well near the chapel. Thomas let go of Callie's hand and helped her sit in the shade. He pulled out a dented canteen from the suitcase and gave it to her. She drank, then handed it back without a word. He took a small sip, then sat beside her. He looked at the sky. No clouds, no sign of rain. That's when he saw the man. He stood near the feed store, leaning against a post, tall, broad shoulders. A slouch hat covered his face, but Thomas could feel the man was watching him. He didn't look angry. He didn't look kind. He just looked quiet. Thomas watched him for a moment, then looked away. He didn't want trouble, not more trouble. But the man began to walk toward them. His boots made soft thuds on the ground. When he stopped in front of Thomas, he spoke in a slow, deep voice. "You lost, son?" Thomas looked up. His face was calm but guarded. "No, sir." "You running from something?" Thomas hesitated. "Yes, sir." The man's eyes moved to Callie. She was picking at the hem of her dress, not looking up. "She your sister?" "Yes, sir." The man nodded. "Name's Walker." Thomas nodded back. "I'm Thomas." Walker sat on the edge of the well across from him. "You hungry?" Thomas didn't answer. Walker continued. "Got stew back at my place, got clean water too." Thomas looked at Callie. Her small face was pale, her lips cracked. She needed rest, food, safety. But he didn't know this man. He didn't know if it was another lie. Walker saw the fear in his eyes. "You don't have to trust me," he said gently. "But the girl's got no color in her cheeks. She won't last long like this." Thomas looked down. His hand tightened on the suitcase. "I don't steal," he said quietly. "And I don't lie." Walker gave a small nod. "Good. I don't like thieves or liars either." He stood, looked toward the ridge behind the town. "My cabin's up past the trees. You can follow if you want. Or not." Then he turned and began to walk. The next morning, the air was cooler. A soft wind blew through the hills, carrying the smell of pine trees and warm dirt. For the first time in days, Thomas didn't wake up scared. He didn't hear footsteps. He didn't hear yelling. Only the quiet crackle of firewood and the soft breath of his little sister Callie, still asleep under a quilt near the hearth. Walker's cabin smelled like cedar and stew. It was small but strong, made of thick logs. The roof didn't leak and the door didn't creak. It felt safe. That alone made it special. Thomas sat up on his cot. He looked around the small room. One window, one door. A coat hanging on a hook, a pair of boots beside it. Walker wasn't inside. Then he heard it. Soft thuds outside like someone lifting something heavy. Thomas opened the door slowly. Walker was in the barn, moving hay bales like they weighed nothing. He wore his same old hat, his sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow. He didn't speak, just gave Thomas a nod and kept working. Thomas stepped into the morning light. His legs still ached from all the walking, but he didn't complain. "You ever stack hay before?" Walker asked. "No, sir." "Well, time to learn." And that was it. No long talk, no questions, just work. Walker showed Thomas how to grip the hay with a hook, how to lift with his legs, not his back, how to stack it tight so it wouldn't fall. Thomas listened carefully. He wanted to get it right. Inside the cabin, Callie sat on the porch steps. She had her stuffed chicken beside her and was watching the chickens in the yard. Every now and then she'd laugh and name one out loud. She called one Buttons and another Lady Peep. Walker didn't argue. He just chuckled under his breath and let her talk. Thomas kept working. His hands hurt, his back burned. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind. Because it wasn't running, it wasn't hiding, it was something real. That night they ate stew again, cornbread too. Walker didn't say much during meals. But before bed he gave Thomas a blanket and pointed to the cot. "You stay as long as you need." Thomas wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead he just nodded. Walker understood. Days passed. Thomas learned to feed the animals. He fixed part of the fence with Walker's help. He cleaned the tools in the shed. He even learned how to saddle a horse, though the horse didn't seem to like him yet. Still, he kept trying. Callie laughed more now. She helped gather eggs even if she cracked most of them by accident. She wore a little ribbon in her hair, tied crooked, but proud. She still didn't say much, but her eyes were brighter. It almost felt like they had found something close to peace, until the dog barked. It was late, nearly midnight. The fire was low. Thomas was just drifting off to sleep when the sharp bark cut through the silence. One bark, low, warning. Thomas sat up fast. His heart pounded. Walker was already at the door, revolver in hand. He gave Thomas a look, serious, calm, and nodded. No words needed. Thomas grabbed the old rifle leaning by the window. His fingers shook, but he held it tight. Together they stepped outside. The night was cold now. Stars filled the sky. The barn door was open, just a crack. Enough to see the lantern inside was swaying. Someone had bumped it. Walker raised his revolver and moved silently. Thomas followed, every step slow and careful. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and old wood mixed with something else. Something bitter. A man stood in the back corner. It was Maddox. His coat looked cleaner than it should have been. His boots barely had dust on them. In his hand he held something small and gray, Callie's stuffed chicken. "She's mine," Maddox said, his voice low and mean. "They both are." Walker didn't blink. "Put it down." Maddox smiled. "You can't keep them. You think you're a hero, Cowboy?" Thomas stepped beside Walker. His voice cracked, but it was steady. "No," he said. But you're not taking her. Maddox laughed. Look at you, acting brave. You know I could break you in two? Walker stepped forward. Try. The wind outside howled. Dust blew in through the barn door, and Maddox dropped the toy. It hit the floor softly like a whisper. You've got one chance to walk away, Walker said. Maddox looked at Thomas, then back at Walker. His eyes burned. But he turned and walked out. No fight, no words. Just a shadow disappearing into the dark. Thomas stood frozen. His hands shook around the rifle. He didn't lower it until Maddox was truly gone. 3 days passed. No signs of Maddox. No strange tracks. The wind changed on the 4th morning. It was dry again, but not like before. The air felt sharp. Something unseen was coming. Even the chickens were quiet. The old dog barked once, then hid under the porch. Walker stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, his eyes staring toward the far ridge. Something in his face had gone still. Thomas noticed it right away. He was stacking wood by the shed when he saw Walker stop moving. The cowboy didn't speak. He just stared. Then he turned and said, "Finish what you're doing, but stay close to the house today." Thomas didn't ask why. He didn't need to. That quiet warning in Walker's voice was enough. He helped Callie wash her hands after, feeding the goats, then brought her inside. She sat by the window with her stuffed chicken in her lap, drawing pictures in the dust on the glass. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Thomas nodded slowly. "Maybe." Callie didn't ask more. She just sat still. Outside, Walker checked the rifle by the door and loaded his revolver with slow, careful hands. He set an extra box of bullets on the table. Thomas watched him and felt a weight settle in his chest. He knew. The peace wasn't going to last. And before the sun reached the middle of the sky, it happened. A horse came down the ridge. One rider, moving fast. Thomas stood on the porch, the old rifle clutched tight in his hands. Walker came out and stood beside him. The rider stopped near the edge of the fence. Clay Maddox. He looked the same, tall, cruel eyes, slick black coat. But now there was a new scar down his cheek and something wild in his face. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at them, then spat in the dirt. "Come to return what's mine," he said. Walker didn't move. "You lost the right to anything when you raised your hand against a child. She's not yours. She's not yours either." Thomas stepped forward, heart racing. "You don't scare us anymore." Maddox laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "Boy, you don't even know what fear is yet." Walker raised his voice then, low and full of thunder. "You turn your horse and ride, you don't look back. This land don't welcome men like you." Maddox's hand moved toward his gun, but Walker had already drawn. A shot fired. Maddox jerked back, his hat flying off. Blood marked the edge of his coat. He didn't fall, but he didn't shoot either. Instead, he cursed and rode off, kicking dust high into the air. Thomas stared after him, his chest pounding. Walker didn't speak. He watched the trail of dust disappear over the hill, then turned and went back into the house. "We need to be ready," he said. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire watching the shadows crawl along the walls. Callie slept on her quilt, her arms wrapped around her toy chicken. She looked peaceful. Too peaceful. He heard the barn doors creak. Then came the smell. Smoke. Thomas jumped to his feet and ran to the window. The barn was on fire. The flames licked the sky. The horses inside screamed. Walker was already outside yelling, "Get the water pump!" Thomas grabbed the old buckets. His hands shook, but he didn't stop. Together, he and Walker worked in the dark, throwing water onto the fire. The wood cracked and hissed. Sparks flew in the air. Callie stood on the porch, crying. Walker kicked open the barn door and pulled the horses out, coughing from the smoke. His coat was burned at the sleeve, but he didn't stop. Then Thomas saw him. Maddox, standing at the edge of the trees, a lantern in one hand, a gun in the other. Thomas dropped the bucket and grabbed the rifle. "Maddox!" he shouted. Walker turned fast. Maddox pointed the gun at Thomas. "You should have stayed quiet, boy. Before Thomas could breathe, a gunshot rang out. Maddox staggered back, clutching his side. Walker had fired again, clean, fast, without mercy. Maddox dropped to one knee, groaning in the dirt. Walker stepped forward. "You've got one last choice." Maddox looked up, pain in his face, fire behind him, hate in his eyes. "End it," he said. Walker didn't move. "Leave, and if I ever see you near them again, I won't aim for the side." Maddox growled but crawled back to his horse, bleeding and broken. He didn't say another word. He just rode off into the dark, firelight dancing behind him. Thomas stood frozen. His arms trembled. Callie ran to him and hugged his legs. "It's over?" Thomas looked at Walker. The cowboy. The morning after the fire, the land smelled like smoke and new earth. Ash floated through the air like soft snow, landing on the porch, on the grass, and even on the chickens. But there was no fear in the air, just quiet. Walker stood beside, the ashes of the barn, a shovel in one hand. His coat was torn at the shoulder, his hands black with soot. He didn't speak. He just looked at what was left, then slowly began to clear the rubble. Thomas came out a few minutes later holding 2 mugs. One was filled with hot water and a pinch of coffee grounds. The other had warm milk for Callie. He handed the first, one to Walker without a word, and sat on the edge of the porch steps. Callie was already outside, her hair messy from sleep, her toy chicken tucked under her arm. She wore her favorite dress, still dusty from the night before, but she smiled as she watched the sun rise over the hills. They were all tired, but they were still standing. Walker finished his drink, set the mug down on a stone, and leaned on his shovel. "You did good," he said to Thomas. Thomas looked surprised. "Me? You held your ground, protected your sister. That's more than most men ever do." Thomas looked down at his hands, scraped, blistered, but steady. "I thought he'd come back again last night," he said. "I didn't sleep." Walker nodded. "I didn't either." A long silence followed, broken only by the soft cluck of a hen nearby. Then Walker said something Thomas didn't expect. "I was just like you once. A boy running from someone mean. Someone who thought hurting people made him strong." Thomas looked at him. Walker didn't often talk about his past. "I found this place years ago," Walker went on. "Built the cabin with my own hands. Thought, if I stayed quiet, stayed alone, the past wouldn't follow me. But it did," Thomas said softly. Walker gave a dry smile. "It always does, but you get stronger, and one day the monster shows up, and you're ready." Thomas nodded slowly. They spent the day rebuilding. Walker showed Thomas how to lift the heavy timbers, how to dig a proper foundation, how to hammer nails without splitting the wood. They didn't talk much, but the work itself spoke loud enough. Callie helped too. She brought them water in a little tin cup and held nails in her small hands. Every so often, she'd stop and make up a song about the chickens or the fire. Her voice was high and sweet and made Thomas smile, even when he didn't mean to. That night, they ate by the fire again. No barn now, just open sky above and warm food in their hands. The stars blinked quietly, and the wind carried a cool breeze through the trees. Walker sat back against the log pile, a wool blanket over his knees. Thomas sat beside him, his arms wrapped around Callie, who had finally fallen asleep against his shoulder. "She trusts you," Walker said after a while. Thomas looked down at her face, peaceful, her fingers still curled around the stuffed chicken. "She's all I've got," he said. "And I almost lost her." "But you didn't," Walker said firmly. "You held on." Thomas looked at the fire, then at the cabin behind them. "You think this place is ours now?" he asked. Walker didn't answer right away. He pulled something from his coat pocket and handed it to Thomas. A key, rusty at the edges, worn from years of use. Thomas stared at it. "I already have the shed key," he said. "This one's for the house," Walker said. "If you're going to stay, you should have it." Thomas blinked, then took the key with both hands. It felt heavy, important. "Means you belong," Walker said. "Means you carry weight, and means I trust you." Thomas swallowed the lump in his throat. "Thank you." Walker nodded. You earned it. The next morning, Thomas woke up before the sun. He stepped outside and watched the sky change from dark blue to orange and gold. Birds sang softly in the trees. The air smelled clean, like wood, ash, and something new. Callie was still asleep in the cabin, her stuffed chicken beside her. Walker was already at the fence checking the posts. His movements were slower today, but strong. Thomas walked out to him holding the hammer. What's next? He asked. Walker smiled. We fix the fence. Then maybe we teach the goats not to chew on your sister's dress. Thomas laughed. A full, real laugh. And Walker laughed too, just a little. But it was enough. They worked all morning. They fixed the fence, patched the chicken coop, and made plans to rebuild the barn better than before. A few neighbors from the nearby hills came down that afternoon. One brought nails, another brought extra timber. Nobody asked too many questions. They just nodded at Walker, gave a quiet hello to Thomas, and patted Callie on the head when she peeked out from the porch. One woman left a jar of peach preserves. Callie clapped her hands with joy. By sunset,